welcome back to Awkward Sports. That's Harrison. I'm Josh. We're here to break down what was an immaculate Thursday night football game between two NFC South rivals, between the Atlanta Falcons at home in Mercedes-Benz Stadium and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers coming on the road, trying to get another big road win. Harrison, last time the Bucs were on the road was against the Detroit Lions. They had a massive win there, looking to start this season 1-0 in the division here against Atlanta and take firm control, with the Falcons already coming into the game with 2 losses. The Bucs only had the 1, and it goes to overtime, and it was a dramatic finish, and Kirk Cousins ends up throwing for over 500 yards, and they end up winning on a walk-off touchdown. Harrison, tough one to watch, man, for a Bucs fan. Falcons fans have been waiting a long time for a win like that against a big-time team, and it lived up to the hype.
Tough, tough, tough. This kind of embodies in a way just the Bucs season as a whole. I'm not exactly because I don't think everyone thought the Bucs should have beaten the Falcons per se, but it still comes down to look, they beat the Lions and then they lost to the Broncos and then they beat the Eagles. This was a team that was very much in the driver's seat to potentially be probably still maybe 3-2 on the season, depending on how the season should have been. But arguably with the upset wins with Detroit and the blown loss to the lead to the Falcons and the win over the Eagles, you think this team could be 5-0 right now. So not the case. And this defense tonight, I know there's other issues and we'll get into that too, but I think this is where you really got to start, is the fact that Kirk Cousins threw for over 500 yards, which means the Bucs defense gave up over 500 yards. That can't happen. That is brutal. It's one thing if that happens in college, you know what? That's a shootout kind of game. In the NFL, that cannot happen. That is, I guess to their credit, the running game was held to okay. Bijan only rushed for 60 yards. Tyler Algier didn't really do anything apart from one single run. But man, they're really missing Antoine Winfield right now. That secondary is very, very thin.
Yeah, definitely. And you look at, speaking how thin that secondary was, the Falcons definitely took advantage of it. Credit to Zach Robinson, the offensive coordinator for the Falcons, devising up a scheme where not only they were picking apart this Buccaneer defense, it looked like they were doing so with ease. I mean, receivers were just wide open all night long, making play after play after play. With the exception of this one particular play where I was really impressed from the Bucs defense, and they just couldn't get that stop, where it was Kirk Cousins threw that laser to Darnell Mooney in the end zone. He caught it for a touchdown in traffic. That one, to me, was one of the better covered plays, and they came down with that big time score there. And that was one of those deflating plays, because how poorly that defense had played all night long. That was one of the better plays from them, I thought, and the Falcons still converted. But yeah, you mentioned it. We mentioned it. Kirk Cousins over 500 passing yards, a single game record for the Falcons. He did not throw one single pass, Harrison, being in the lead. He did not throw one pass as the Falcons had the lead the entire night.
It's not crazy stat, ain't
it? Yeah, it's the first time that's happened. The Falcons did have a lead in the game before they won, but Kirk Cousins did not throw a pass while the Falcons were in the lead. You look at the Falcons going up 7-0, the Bucs taking it back down and tying it up. Then the Falcons got the ball back at a tie game. Kirk Cousins never threw one pass when they were in the lead, which to me was one of the more surprising stats of the night. But we can talk about the Swiss cheese that is the defense. Yes, they are missing some players, but the Falcons did a really good job exploiting all those gaps. Kirk Cousins was moving around KJ Britt like he was in total control of that defense. And just the offensive line for Atlanta was able to hold up long enough to give Kirk Cousins a lot of that time to make those throws. This narrative of Kirk Cousins not playing well in prime time, he has been putting that to rest, especially this year. I think in his last 6 primetime games, he's 5-1, and he's 2-0 this year with a win against Philly, and now the win against the Bucs in overtime. And with that type of performance, on the night that the Falcons honored Matt Ryan into their Ring of Honor, they showed up. And when their backs were against the wall, they showed their resiliency and got a crucial NFC South win.
Yeah, it was very like when you mentioned the Kirk Cousins never throwing when they're ahead. It kind of reminds me, remember Aaron Rodgers' Hail Mary against the Lions about 10 years ago? Where they
Remember
led,
Hail Mary. The amount of Hail Marys that guy succeeded in, it's crazy.
it just
But
reminds me of how they won despite leading for 0 minutes and 0 seconds, and yet they walked it off. A bit of a different situation, but that the stat reminded me of that. It was very reminiscent of, for better or for worse, for a lot of the fans listening, an Aaron Rodgers kind of game.
yeah, it was. And vintage Aaron Rodgers kind of game, because the Aaron Rodgers that we're seeing now with the Jets is not that same guy.
No, of course, but I think most people know what I mean by that.
Yeah, nevertheless.
You're not going out there and just shredding your ankle the first week.
Right. But let's dive in more in depth on this game. Just the twists and turns that were throughout the entire night of this Thursday night classic thriller per se. And the Falcons, it was at this point, like if you're cheering from a Bucs perspective, you're just praying this defense gets some kind of stop. Atlanta starting to slow down the Bucs offense, not like keeping them off the scoreboard per se, but keeping them out of the end zone. But the Falcons offense kept on humming, and they had this crucial turning point in the game that I thought was a massive turning point at the time. Darnell Mooney had like busted a coverage. Jamel Dean didn't stay with him, and Mooney was wide open, and he dropped the ball. And it was like, there it is. I was like, just give this team a break. Give this defense a break that they're looking for. And they got that break with Mooney dropping that ball. Next thing you know, Younghoe Koo is coming onto the field to attempt the field goal, and they blocked the field goal. And now I'm thinking, Harrison, Tampa just dodged a bullet. This offense that the Falcons have been putting on, they've been putting on a clinic all night. They got off the field. They got their stop. Now they need to go up. Now they get back on the field. They need to go down and score a touchdown and kind of separate themselves, make it a 2-score game. But credit to the Falcons defense. They bent, they didn't break. They kept the Bucs kicking field goals, and they kept the game within reach. And, as the game wore on, it was just one of those things where it just felt like the Bucs needed to make one more big play. They needed to make one more play, whether it was to get into the end zone, another big time defensive play. And it appeared that we got that down the stretch, Levante David with the interception, because then you're thinking, okay, well, now you just need a first down, run out the clock, game's over. And if you can't get the first down, you're kicking a field goal. And at least as a touchdown, it's a 6-point game where the Falcons would have to go the whole field in regulation to win the game. And not only they didn't get a first down, some penalties, holdings, and it's screenplays that went nowhere. Murphy's Law kicking in. They didn't even get a field goal. They had to punt it away, and the Falcons got the ball back, and all they needed was a field goal to send it to overtime.
Yeah, and the thing about the penalties too, like those are one of the things the Bucs did better than the Falcons. Fewer penalties for yards, but at the same time, the ones the Bucs made were the most untimely, you could argue. And when you talk about the blocked field goal as well, like that's what the narrative easily could have become, is the Falcons could not take advantage of the extra opportunities to score, and they didn't, and then they would have lost. Like Younghoe Koo missed 2 field goals, and arguably, in a way, you can argue he missed 3, because on the first missed field goal, he missed a 46-yarder, got bailed out because the Bucs were offsides, then kicked a 41-yarder, and that missed 2. They both went wide left.
Yeah.
Very easily could have been the story of the night was the Falcons played well, better than the Bucs, and still just missed a win on a few key opportunities. But of course, that's not what happened. In the end, the Bucs offense just sputtered out. We haven't even gotten to that yet. And the consistent role of Atlanta led to a win.
Yeah, and I mean, and to your point, you just brought up the Young Wei Koo field goals that he missed earlier in the game. It's not
Young
like the
Waku.
Falcons, but it's not like the Falcons were not getting in their own way as well. Like they had those missed field goals. We had the like you mentioned the offsides. They had another chance at it. They didn't get it. We got a couple of breaks in the game that we needed. But again, we can go back to that last drive again where Tampa had a chance to kind of put that thing away after the Levante David interception. They had it was a second down and long, second and 26. Most people would tell you to run in that scenario. Tampa decided to dial up a screen pass. So now you're thinking, all right, are we going the same route that Philly went, where Saquon might have dropped the ball, and we're going to have that discussion, where we stopped the clock again and didn't learn from Philly's mistakes? Well, no, they dialed up a pass play, and it was caught. But if you looked at that play, Baker initially rolled out to his right, and I think what he was doing was trying to get the defense away from the screen to try to create more separation. But Mike Evans was running right there with him, and he was wide open where it was like it was a throw that Baker's gonna make. It's a play that Mike's gonna make, and it was just like what and like what how amazing that alternate reality could have been for Bucs fans had Baker kind of walked it off there, thrown that little lob to Mike Evans, who was all by himself, and he would have walked in for a touchdown. And that would have been his third on the night. The Bucs would have put their distance with Atlanta, and then you don't even get to the overtime period.
No, and by the way, my apologies. I said Young Hoku. It's Young Hueku. You were correct. Misspoke there. But also want to point out with the Bucs too, just like look, late in the game, you also had a situation where they fumbled the ball and they lost it. Bucky Irving lost in a good spot. And then they did get bailed out when Levante David picked off Kirk Cousins. But it's those small opportunities, like you said, it could have been a pass downfield to Mike Evans. It could have been Irving doesn't lose the ball on the Atlanta 30, and they're able to find a way to get maybe the extra field goal where the Falcons need the touchdown, not just the field goal.
Yeah, I mean,
Things, that
oh
second half underperformance really did them in. Not like I know the 500 defensive yards are going to do that. Giving up 500 yards is going to do the same thing, but basically everything that could have gone wrong went wrong for this team.
yeah, and it's hard to win a game when you give up 500 passing yards in the air. You talk about the number of opportunities that both sides had, and you just look at this game as a whole. Just hoping that sometimes that we talk about those plays that possibly could have been missed, but Harrison, we get to that overtime period, right? And we talk about the coin toss. Obviously, Falcons won the toss. I'm always a heads guy, Harrison. I don't know about you, so I'm like yelling at my TV, heads,
Dude,
heads,
I'm
and
always a tails guy.
tails. And Baker says tails, and I'm like, no, and it was heads. And
So I would have been wrong because I always pick tails.
yeah, I always
I
pick heads.
swear, tails usually happens more for me than heads.
Yeah, for me, it's always heads. I'm always like pick heads because people, you know how the saying goes. People are like tails never fails. I'm always like tails.
Tails does never fail. Well, I guess
I'm like tails always fails. I'm like that's how I say it. And I the Falcons get the ball first, and credit to them, they take it all the way down the field. Bucs need a stop, they can't get it, and that was the ending of the game. A dramatic one on Matt Ryan's night for the Falcons. By the way, they looked stellar last night. The field was superb. They brought out their throwbacks. One of the more underrated
throwbacks were
throwbacks.
so nice to have back. I will say that as opposed to those weird bubble numbers, having grown up with the Bucs, we know what it's like to go see outrageous uniforms for 4 or 5 years. The Falcons went with the throwbacks. I think they know what to do when they've reached the 5 year mark.
Yeah,
I don't say you necessarily have to get rid of the main logo. I think most people are okay with that. But from the collar down to the cleats,
perfect.
what they're wearing, I think they know what they need to go back to. I
Right,
think
and
we
I
all
think
know that.
and I think a lot would agree. I think a lot would agree. And me being a uniform guy, I had to give that shout out. So they look good, they played good, you look good, you feel good, you play good. The Falcons certainly did. I wanted to go back though to something that you mentioned a little bit earlier. You talked about the some of the like the fumble. Bucky Irving got the ball punched loose by none other than Jesse Bates III, and also Chris Godwin. The same thing happened earlier in the game where the Bucs kind of dodged a bullet on that one, where Mike Evans was right there to scoop that thing up and fall on that football. Second time, not as fortunate, but like people were looking at Bucky like the camera kept cutting to Bucky like it was like his fault that they lost. Like Levante David got that pick afterwards, so that's not on him. And also,
Yeah, but I kind of get it because in the end, like even that is a situation in which they could have at least picked up 3 more points.
right, yes. But I did want to but that's also more of a testament to Jesse Bates than it is Bucky Irving fumbling the ball. Because if you see the replay, Bates
Okay, that I get.
punches it out. Like Antoine Winfield led safeties last year in forced fumbles, I believe. And Jesse Bates this year has really stepped up his game in that department. And honestly, right now, and a lot of Bucs fans are going to hate me for saying this. Right now, Jesse Bates currently is the best safety in football. And the bottom line,
Well, it helps when Winfield's not around the play.
the reason the bottom line for that is because he's available. He is on the field. And I love Antoine Winfield Jr., but we got to get him back, especially for that rematch game because that game is all the more crucial. But Jesse Bates showed up to play for the Falcons last night. But, Harrison, they fought all the way through regulation. They get to overtime. And, the Falcons win the toss and they go down and score.
Yeah. So, and first thing I want to say with Bates is the best ability is availability. All right, I got that cheesy one-liner out of the way. But
Yeah.
I guess it leads to a fun question too. And I preface this with the Bucs never should have been in overtime to begin with.
Right.
And they lost fair and square based on the rules. However, I felt like it's a good time to just have an old-fashioned argument here. Should NFL update their overtime rules? So, I'm not saying it has to be like college. I don't think in the NFL you should start at the opponent's 25 and have an automatic first down built in there. But I think the game could benefit from something similar where both teams alternate until someone comes out on top. It shouldn't be where you have more of an advantage because you won a coin that was flipped by an official. When you alternate, is purely decided purely by the fact that one team did better in overtime than the other. Somebody got that stop, someone got that extra score, or found the end zone and someone else kicked a field goal. There's a better way to do it than it's over after 2 plays. And I fully get the argument for sudden death too. Look, you didn't win the coin toss, but you can still get the stop or all that. But I think the game would benefit if you go in and you have it where it's more earned based on what happened on the field than an advantage given to you by a coin.
Yeah, I mean, hey, the league heard you when it came to the playoffs, right? They made that change where both teams get the ball. Obviously, they haven't done that yet in the regular season. I don't know, maybe they should. You know me, my take on it. I'm a little more old-fashioned. I think that yeah, the team gets the ball. Do they get an advantage? Sure. That's why everyone takes the ball in overtime. I would do the same thing. If I won the coin toss, I'd take it as well. But if you don't get it, then for me, I'm just like, all right, defense got to go out there if you want a chance to win that game. You got to go get that stop. And I get that, you can change that rule and make it where both teams get a chance. And logically, it makes sense. And there are a number of compelling cases to be made for that rule to be changed, which is why the NFL went ahead and changed it for the playoffs. And maybe now they should talk about doing it for the season. But for me, I've always been on the side of I like the way that the rule is, imperfect and all. And and even though you could possibly make it in a situation where other people, or more fair rather, under the current state, hey, you go out there, try your best, you go get a stop, and give your team a chance to go out there and do it themselves. And I think you can still get a pretty dramatic finish. But I think Harrison, to me, I mean, there's a compelling case I feel like to be made on both sides. I think we could argue this all day long.
We could. But I just want to throw in one thought that I actually just came to mind as I was thinking about this. It came because you mentioned, oh yeah, I'll take the ball first every single time. Of course you would, because you can go score and win. In theory, if you go to both sides, get the ball at least once, there's almost like a strategy to the coin toss. Like, let's say, all right, you're gonna get the ball no matter what, but you could potentially strategically say, I'm going to take the ball second because then you have a better idea of what you need to do. Like, let's say, for example, you let the other team have the ball first. They either kick a field goal or they get a touchdown or you get the stop. It's like, all right, you help them do a field goal. All you got now, you can get the touchdown, or all we need is a field goal to keep this going. It can allow you to try different ways to be more creative and add a little more strategy to overtime than just, all right, cool, I won the coin toss. It's my ball. Let's go win it right now.
Right, and I think that if they went that route, I think you'd see a lot of teams picking second for sure. I think that you could see a lot like you'd see at the beginning of games, like the defer. You see it in college all the time. Teams usually defer. So I think that's just what that does. But yeah, I mean, you get into that extra period. Obviously, given the way the Bucs and the Falcons were playing, offensively based for the most part for most of that game, obviously you're going to want the ball. And you're going to want a chance to get a crack at it. But ultimately, that's what the rules are. What they are right now. Bucs had a chance to go out there and get a stop defensively to get themselves the chance at the ball. We've seen it happen before. We saw Cincinnati do it to Kansas City, and they ended up playing in the Super Bowl afterwards. So we knew what they could do. Obviously, we can make the argument that it can be changed and be more fair, and this, that, and the third. But ultimately, when it comes down to last night's game, and we know what the rules are, and we know what's going to have to take place, Bucs had a chance there to get a stop, get the ball back, and ultimately couldn't get it done. But more credit just goes to the Falcons there for keeping that offense on pace all night long. Just 500 passing yards, spreading the ball around to all these different receivers, and Bucs defense just looked lost out there. So absolutely, I would have taken the ball first, given the defense's performance last night. But hey, credit to the Falcons, they got it done.
Yep, absolutely. They were the better team, especially when it mattered most. We can all agree the Bucs need to do better next week when they head to New Orleans to take on the Saints, because the Falcons were a challenge. Believe me, the Saints never fail to be a challenge for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, no matter whether sometimes it's more of a challenge at home versus at the Superdome. So maybe that does kind of help their chances a little bit. But you know what? We'll find out, won't we?
Yeah, it's a must win for sure. After the loss of the Falcons, you got to go up and play the Saints. It's definitely a must win. You can't start 0-2 in the division. You got to be able to win those games. And again, last night they really showed up down the stretch. It was a great game between two teams that were heavily anticipated to be teams that were going to be clashing for that top spot. The Saints more of a surprise, but you can't overlook them. It's the NFL.
Right, again.
Every week's hard. You got to earn them all. And the Falcons, to me, showed the resiliency last night. The Bucs were so close to escaping with a win that just kind of felt like a game that they didn't quite deserve to win, and they still almost came away with it. But more credit to the Falcons, they got it done. That's a tough one to swallow, Harrison. I think that's one of the harder Bucs losses I've seen.
It's one of the hardest ones I've seen in a while. It's just because it's not like, okay, they got beat early and then it was just a beat down to the end, or you're just waiting for the clock to run down so you can, with your head hanging down in defeat. Like, those are one of those where you had the lead, all you had to do was make one more play, and it cost you.
Yeah. It felt like that, especially in the second half, where it just felt like the Bucs needed to make one more play. And credit to the Falcons for the ultimate like bend but don't break performance. Like
And that's
we
usually what the Bucs do, is their bend don't break.
Yeah, and
They
they
kind of lost to their own game a little bit. They got beaten in their own game.
a little bit like the way that that game went last night. That was kind of how I more envisioned the Detroit game going, as opposed to this one going. But Drake London, 12 of 13, 13 targets, 12 catches, over 150 yards. Kyle Pitts had a decent night. I mean, we talked about Mooney, even though he had that drop, he had a good game as well. And then, of course, Hodge, God, I don't even remember his first name. I mean, he just like they torched our defense everywhere. And I know that we were missing some guys, but even for this defense, I was a little surprised that that was kind of the outcome. If you had told me the Bucs offense was going to go in there and drop 30, I would have really liked our chances. Um, but the good thing is that's the first matchup against the Falcons. They're going to get another crack at them in a couple of weeks. It'll be interesting to see what kind of adjustments are made. Again, record wise, the Falcons do have the head-to-head, but the Bucs and the Falcons have the same record at 3-2. This was more of an opportunity for the Bucs to take firm control of the division, an opportunity missed, but season not by any means close to over, and it's not even by any means the division is being close to over.
Oh no.
A number of divisional games left, and sometimes it's good to have one of these types of losses early to see how you can build off of it and learn. They had their beat down against Denver. That was a humbling loss. Now they had one where they lost in narrow fashion. They're getting experience throughout this team, throughout this season. Yes, this team's going to have to make moves at the deadline if they want to actually compete for more than just a division title, I think.
Or even
But
just a playoff win.
yeah, but as this team is constructed currently, there is a lot to like. They just have to make a few tweaks, and then this team could be a legitimate threat down the stretch, not only of the regular season, but the postseason as well. This has been another incredible episode of Awkward Sports. That is my bud Harrison. I am Josh. And as always, we will see you next time. Peace.